Hello everyone, I'm Fernando Hernandez. My video today is going to be about liberty, the concept of liberty, and this is essentially going to be covering what I learned this semester in my Philosophy 207 class with Professor Nielsen. The concept of liberty, like every concept, is an abstract concept, right? It's simply arbitrary, um, to say the least, but it has very grounded phenomenological applications to every modality that we could possibly think of. So the reason why I chose this topic, the topic of liberty, is because it is more philosophical than I believe, which it sets the foundation for the rest of the concepts that we were giving. Um, so why did I choose liberty? So first, essentially, is because the philosophy that specifically the Christian worldview holds to, and the application thereof, is very impactful to Western civilization. And I believe that to understand this primary dogma, that we could actually have a more coherent and logical understanding of how it could be applied to the rest of the concepts given to us, which is distributive justice, individualism, justice, etc. So, what is liberty, right? In one of the lectures provided to us by Professor Nielsen, um, is first defining liberty as freedom, and the most basic freedom, right? The etymology of liberty it comes or derives from the Latin word libertas or libero, which just means to be set free, right? Um, uh, so essentially, it has a metaphysical implication of what it is trying to convey. So to be set free has a metaphysical implication of freedom, right? And this is what I wanted to get into. After I defined the topic of, or at least I defined the word liberty, right? But it has such a fundamental attribute to it that it captured my attention the most, and I believe it's a concept that many people are foreign to, yet they experience it every day since they were born. So in Christian dogma, right, specifically Reformed Christian dogma, there is two senses of liberty. There is natural liberty and there is moral liberty, right? First, we only have one of these liberties, and this is our natural liberty. Natural liberty is the ability or freedom to act according to our nature, or what our nature implies, right? Then we move to moral liberty. Moral liberty is a bit difficult to understand, primarily because it presupposes a set of dogmas from the Christian worldview. The presuppositions behind moral liberty is that of a Calvinist view, right? That in Calvinism, generally attributed to John Calvin, but essentially it derives from the Apostle Paul and Saint Augustine of Hippo in the first, second, and third century of the Christian Church. So Calvinism teaches that our moral liberty only allows us to act according to our nature, or only allows our virtues to be acted according to our nature. So essentially, our moral liberty is not equal or equated to the moral liberty of God. Saint Augustine kind of splits the two differences and very well kind of divides it, right? So in one of his of the subdivisions of moral liberty, we have non posse non peccare, or not able not to sin. So it's a double negative, meaning so able to sin, not able not to sin. So that just means that all we can do is pretty much sin. What this actually means is that since we are born, because of the fall of Adam in the Garden of Eden, uh, our ontological, ability to pursue the things of God and communicate with God is no longer able, or we don't have no longer the ability to do so. And because of this, we can no longer do what is right according to the standard of the Christian God. So many people will first counter argue by saying, well, we do have freedom to do what is good. Well, this is where we have to understand the different types of standards, right? We have our own moral standards, yet there is a universal moral standard, right? Many ethical dilemmas arise by this, and egoism and utilitarianism would have a different meaning of ethics. But I say that ethics essentially, to be consistent with our actions, right, presupposes a Christian view of morality. So one thing that can be essentially used as proof by this is problem of guilt. The problem of guilt is actually a heavy topic in philosophical fields, but as well but as also in psychological fields, right? You have the problem of guilt, which actually many psychologists, I forget the name of one from the 1960s, who essentially explored the problem of guilt and essentially says that it actually leads to mental illnesses, right? This problem of guilt is essentially our consciousness letting us know that we actually have fallen short to this absolute moral standard. So why I point this out is because we are not able to fulfill this absolute law, or what I would call a theonomy, a God-given law. Theos meaning God, onomy or nami, just meaning law in Greek. So theonomy is a God-given law prescribed to every human being and only human beings, because they have the ontological preconditions to understand and rationalize and really comprehend what the law is meant to say. And this is why in Genesis 1, where God talks about he created man in his image, this is essentially what he means is man having the ability to reason and rationalize what the law implies. Then we have posse non peccare, Augustine's second description, so able not to sin. This is only given to those believers in the Christian faith, which just means that we are able not to sin. Why this is important is when we come to understand the gravity of our nature, right? We read in the few first weeks of the semester we read Plato's Republic, right? And he emphasized the man's ontology and how we needed a system that can be fitted in very closely to man's ontology, and he recommended that the best government that could be given to man is that one which has a philosophical king, right? Philosopher king, sorry. And after that, it just levels down the other types of government that is given to the rest of the people, right? So essentially, the top person or the top individual ruling the nation is that of a philosopher king, or at least have the attributes thereof. So essentially, this is what I'm trying to say. Understanding our ontology is very important. The reason why I talked about moral liberty is because we actually do not have moral liberty, and I'll kind of transition into applying our ontological incapacities to a political spectrum, right? For instance, in a democratic society, or at least a democratic republic nation like ours, we are going to be choosing individuals who represent our moral liberty, and in that moral liberty, in exercising our natural liberty, we're going to be choosing individuals who fit our own moral standards and not the theonomous moral standard, right? The God-given standard. What this brings to the table is that we're going to be promoting a leader which essentially is incapacitated to act morally correct according to a universal standard of truth and of ethics. Why this is important is because essentially giving the wrong individual complete sovereignty over the land will essentially affect the rest of the popular vote, right? We believe in popular sovereignty, but is it really sovereignty, right? John Calvin, in his Institutes of Christian Religion, says that God judges a nation by giving them corrupt leaders. And essentially, it's not necessarily a judgment, rather than that democratic nation chose that leader, right? But it's just, it follows the flow of logic and reasoning of how one step can cause a domino effect to lead to essentially a huge problem to a society. So I like to quote a Christian philosopher and the Prime Minister of the Netherlands from 1901 to 1904. His name was Abraham Kuyper. Abraham Kuyper, in one of his articles, writes, but for the rest, yes, without sphere sovereignty, right? So this is what I meant by sovereignty. There's spheres in temporal reality, which are divided, right? And he divides them within national, scientific, and reformed. These are pretty much the spheres, and what he means by these is that they are all divided to actually create. They're actually microcosms of what are create our whole entirety of a societal system. So essentially, he says here that, but for the rest, yes, without sphere sovereignty, right, without that doctrine that God is sovereign in every sphere or every modality, the state's unlimited rule, disposing of persons, their life, their rights, their conscience, and even their faith. So this is what I'm saying, right? If we choose corrupt leaders, we're essentially going to get ruled unrighteously. Disposing the right persons, their life, their rights, their conscience, and even their faith. It was then many gods, and therefore, because of this, the only unlimited state was more imposing, more majestic than the divided might of the gods. And because of this, the state embodied in Caesar itself became God. So this is just referring to Caesar, King Caesar of Rome, who pretty much was known to judge unrighteously. For me, it's impactful because he covers that when we give control to even a person who holds to this ideology can essentially corrupt every sphere or every modality in our reality. So not only does our liberty have the capacity, to influence a individual who can corrupt us. So it's kind of like a circle of trading, right? We give power to a corrupt leader, and essentially what he gives back is corruption and unrighteous ruling, which will affect not only our family, not only our government, but essentially even ourselves, right? And Kuyper talks about how he can even corrupt our faith. And this is essentially what liberty, I believe, is capable of doing in modern Western culture. The fact that we have a democracy puts more caution, at least gives us more ability to choose what is right and wrong. But essentially, if we are not conscious about our liberty, it could actually end up horrifically wrong for everyone.